We'll wait for 2 minutes and then we'll start. And ఓకే అండి. సో విల్ స్టార్ట్ అండి. నేను మ్యూట్‌లో పెడుతున్నాను. ఒకవేళ మీకు ఏమైనా క్వెషన్స్ ఉంటే యూ కెన్ అన్‌మ్యూట్ అండ్ యూ కెన్ ఆస్క్ అండి. ఓకే. సో లెట్స్ ఓపెన్ ది కంటెంట్ పేజ్. So we are in Warrior of Databases topic, and in this topic we discussed about server architecture and then creating databases and properties of important properties of database and creating, and then also we discussed about database architecture, like what are the different files we have for the database, and then what kind of data will store in the data file and log file, and importance of log file, and the processing, the data processing or transaction processing, all this kind of information we discussed in the previous classes. So in today's class, we are going to discuss about Warrior system databases, right? So as I said, we have two different type of databases. One is system databases, and the second one is the user-defined databases. So user-defined database means the database is manually created in SQL Server. We can call it as a user-defined database. And user-defined databases we mainly using for data storage. When it comes to the system databases, and we have 5 system databases, these 5 system databases will create along with the SQL Server installation. So these system databases mainly are using to contain the system related information. We'll see that what kind of information will be in the system databases. Okay, if you want to see the system databases, we have to connect the SQL Server, and once you connect the server, we can see the database tab. And if you expand the database tab, there we can see the system database tab. Under the main database tab, we have a system databases tab. If you expand that, there we can see the system databases. Here we can see 4 system databases. Those are master, model, MSDB, and TimDB. And there is a one more database called resource database. This database we cannot see it here. We can call it is, we can see it physically, but we cannot see logically in the SSMS. So this database we can simply call it as a hidden database, and the main name, the standard name is a resource database. Okay, these 5 database created in SQL Server along with the SQL Server installations. So we no need to separately create system databases. Right? So among these 5 databases, the primary and most important database is master database. So, so simply you can say master database contain the metadata of the SQL Server information. So metadata of the SQL Server. So what is metadata? What kind of information will be in the master database? So master database contain all the configuration information. If you remember, after installing the SQL Server, so we changed some configuration settings. So during installation also some settings will be enabled. All kind of configuration related settings information will be storing in the master database. And also, whenever we create any new database, new database data file, log file, the the files information, also file names and then file location, everything will be recorded in the MS master database. And if you create any security certificate or maybe logins information, right? Logins, all I mean the logins information, users information, everything will be in the master database. So configuration, databases creation, database files information, database names information, and apart from that, security information. And if we create any certificate, the certificate information also, we can see it in master database. Right. So, like, if you want to see that, like, as I said that database contain the information, like whatever information, the information will be in the tables. So here we have various tables, system tables.
Hi, Malesh.
Hi, morning, Andy.
Good
Morning.
morning.
Yeah, views and tables, the information will be there. So as I said that all the logins information is in the master database. If you want to see the logins information, we can use select star from sys logins. So if you executing this command on master database, we can see the logins information. Every login uniquely identify the SID. Again, we will discuss more about SID and security, and then status and what time created, what time updated, and name of the login and which database it is creating. And here we can also see the password colon, but password is storing in encrypted, so it cannot be readable and we cannot easily get the password. Here we can see that it is in some different language, unstructured format. It cannot be readable, and we cannot get any reason from SQL Server the password, right? And the permissions information also we can see that. That's mean, and if you want to see the configuration related information, we have one more query, sys.configurations, right? So configuration information, database files information, and logins information, users. And if you create any certificates information also will be in the master database. Okay.
So all the application sessions will be visible in this syslogins, right? Application session information.
No, no, the whatever accounts we granted permission to access the server, only those accounts information we can see that. Like we have a different application logins. Maybe those information, whatever logins we created an application to connect the database. So those, so simply you can define like whatever accounts we created in SQL Server for granting or accessing the SQL Server, those accounts information you can see that.
Okay.
Right. Like there, if you cannot say that application, because application sometimes they're using the application pool, like they are using only one login, but maybe different. Mainly they're using one login to connect to the server, but through applications we can get it. For example, we are IRCTC users, right? So like maybe in the connection string for connecting the application, they're using only one name, but the multiple users pointing to the application people. So they cannot add all users in the database. They created one account to connect to the database, but remaining end user accounts pointing to the application. Through application, this login, the main login will use to connect to the database. So simply you can define like whoever directly connect to the SQL server, those accounts information will be in the SQL server. In the master database in sys.syslogins table. Okay, so when it comes to the configuration, so like maximum memory, like enabling audit login, like these are all we can call it as a server level settings. All the server level settings, and then status, everything will be in the master database. So very crucial database. If any reason if master database is corrected or not available, we cannot start the SQL server. So if you want to run the SQL server, that very important database is master database. Without master database, you cannot start the SQL server services. And there may be chances of correcting the master database. Again, in the backup and recovery classes, if master database is corrupted, how we can recover, the kind of things we'll discuss in backup and recovery classes. Right. So I hope you clear about master database, because this is very important interview question. So mainly you are preparing for interview, so you have to better understanding of system database, because they will ask that, tell me, explain about what are the system databases available in SQL Server. and explain about those databases. This is the kind of question we'll get in interview front of you. Okay, so master database contain the metadata, like all the security logins information, certificates, like we are using some certificates for providing the more security. Like again, if you create any certificates, the certificates information also in the master database. Certificates, logins, configuration, databases, information, and again users. If particularly we're accessing the master database again, so we need to create a user information also will be in the master database, right? And then next one is that model database. So model database doesn't contain any system related information, so it has some properties, and whatever property by default it has some property. Whatever properties model database is having, whenever we create a new database, the new database will create with the same properties of the model database. So that is the reason. Simply you can call it as it will work like a template of the other databases. For example, if you want to create some generic users or maybe generic tables or maybe store procedure on the new databases without manual intervention. So what we can do that, the same kind of tables or store procedure we can create it in the model database. So whenever we create a new database, the new database will automatically inherits the same information, and the new database will create it with the same tables or same store procedure whatever you created in the model database. So not only database objects, again it is applicable for database properties. We discussed about database properties, right? Like recovery models or database warner, and we also have some other properties. During the question and answer session, we will discuss about those properties. Like whatever properties you set to the model database, whenever you create a new database, again a new database is created with the same properties. For example, I'm changing some properties of the model database and options. Here I'm creating bulk log recovery model. Okay, so that's one of the property. So I'm changing. So previously it was in full recovery model. Now I'm changing to bulk log recovery model. Okay, and I'm also want to create a one table. So use model and create table tab one. Okay, so I created table here tab. So now whenever I create a new database will create it with the same properties. Okay, now let's create a new database. And one important note is that whenever you want to create a new database, if any sessions are pointing to the model database, this session is pointing to the model database. If any session is pointing to the model database, it won't allow us to create a database. Okay. New database name DBA test. Okay, so because it's not taking if because of there is a session on the model database, so we need to ensure that nothing should be pointing to the model database. If it is any pointing, I mean if any session, any transaction is pointing to the model database while creating the database, the creation will be failed. So that is the reason it is taking. Could not obtain exclusive lock on database model, retrieve the operation letter. So whenever you want to create a database, you need to ensure that nothing is running on the model database. Okay. Close the session now. Now nothing is running on the model database. Now click OK. Now this time the database has been created. So we created test DBA test one. If you go to properties and if you go to options, now this is The recovery model is bulk logger recovery model. And if I expand the database, we created one table in the model database. The table is tab1. Right? So that means, so if you want to create database with generic properties and don't want to change, don't want to modify after creating a database. So if you want to uh, save this kind of what we can do, then whatever properties you want to set to the databases whenever you create, the same properties we can set to the model database. Okay, so when you said that whenever you create a new database, a new database will create with the same properties. Okay. Yesterday we created testdb, testdb2, right? And we did not do any changes yesterday on model database. Now, if you look into the testdb properties, and if you go to the options, now it has the full recovery model, because yesterday the model database was running with full recovery model, right? So it doesn't contain any information. It contains the some database property, and it is not like a template of the other database, because whenever we create a new database will inherit the same properties from the model database. Clear? And again, if model database is not available and model database is corrupted, again we cannot start SQL Server services. Model database is also very important to run the SQL Server services. And comes to the third database is MSDB. So MSDB database contains all scheduler information, schedule, jobs, maintenance plans, like alerts. So these are all things we'll discuss in later classes. Again, jobs related information, alerts information, schedules information, maintenance plans information. Apart from this information, it also contains backup and restore information. Like whenever we take a backup, whenever we restore the backup, the kind of information also will be in the master database, right? So if you remember, when installing the database engine services, there is a two services. One is SQL Server service. The second one is a agent service. Agent service we are using for schedule operations like jobs and maintenance plan, alerts mechanism, right? All kind of operations we are using agent services. So that is the reason we can say that MSDB contain metadata of the agent services. Whenever you create a job, every information will be in the MSDB database. If agent services are not running, or MSDB corrupted, maybe agent services are MSDB is corrupted, there is impact on the agent services, right? So that's about the MSDB database. And the final database is TimDB. TimDB again doesn't contain any user data, so it contains only the temporary data. Like sometimes in real-time environment for some kind of operations, they're creating the temporary store procedure, temporary tables, temporary views. Whenever they create temporary objects like tables or store procedure views, irrespective of the database they created, that physically those the temporary objects information will be sitting in the TimDB database. So, like if you, like the TimDB store, like tables or views store procedure, we can specify the as symbol, as or maybe double as symbol. So when you create any table or views or store procedure with double as, it will take it as a temporary table. And for example, if you created a temporary table in use a different database, DBA test database, but physically the database is sitting in the TimDB database. Okay, so let me create a TimDB table. So here I'm creating. So always use DBA test one. That's mean use command will change to the select the database. Okay, now this will point to the DBA test one database. Okay, so we don't create any temporary tables in real-time environment, so no need to worry about it. Create temp table. there is a like if you like there is a one more double as and double as like a single as means like it's a session wise temporary table, and then double as means globally session wise and globally. So no need to worry about, because so we don't much use the temporary tables in real time environment. So that's mean I created the TEMP table and DBA test database. But here we can see that this window is pointing to the DBA test one. Okay. But this table physically will store in temp database. Here we can see the TEMP table. Right? Like it contains, that's mean it contains all the temporary tables, temporary objects information. And it also contains version store. Like in the performance tuning classes, we'll discuss about rebuild and reorganization. That time some intermediate data, like that data, the kind of data we can call it as a version store. Again, version store data will also store in the TempDB database. And another specialty for TempDB is that whenever you restart the server, SQL server, all the data will vanish in the TempDB. Whatever temp tables are in the TempDB database, all the tables, all the data will vanish. Right? That's mean whenever we restart the SQL server, TempDB will recreate it with the default size. So that is the reason TempDB creation date, usually we can say that server restore time. Maybe sometimes we'll get the request. Can you tell me that when was the last what time, when was the SQL server restarted? If you want to see this information, we have many options, but one of the option is the TempDB creation date. If you want to see the TempDB creation date, go to properties, and in the properties we can see the date created 5/7/20 So I restarted this SQL server at 9:41 a.m. today, right? So that's one of the important specialty. And apart from that, we cannot take any backup, we cannot do backup and restore operations on the TempDB, because the Microsoft is not enabling that option, because there is no use of taking the TempDB backup, because it doesn't contain any user related, system related data in the TempDB. It contains only the temporary data. There is no use of taking the doing the backup and restore operation. And the second option is that the TempDB data will automatically vanish whenever we restart the SQL server. So here two important questions, like how can we know that when was the SQL server restarted? So using the TempDB creation date. And the second one is that can we take backup and restore operations on TempDB? We cannot do that, because there is no option, there is a need to take the TempDB backup, because it contains only temporary data, and again, so it doesn't support the durability. That's mean whenever you restart the SQL server, automatically the data will vanish. So this way we can answer in interview point of view. And again, if TempDB is not available or corrupted or not accessible, again we cannot start the SQL Server services, right? So these are the four important databases. These database we can view in SSMS. There is a one more database called resource database, but the resource database cannot be, we cannot be in SSMS. So we can call it as a hidden database. So this resource database is available from SQL Server 2005 and above. Before that, there is no concept of resource database. So resource database information also uh, when stored in the master database before 2005. From 2005 onwards, they separated they added resource database. Resource database contain all the system objects. Simply can say that maybe SQL running for running supported files are in the resource database. So like DLL file, some system object which is using to run the SQL Server services, or maybe software supported files, you can say that. Again, if resource database is not available or corrupted, again we cannot start the resource databases. Sorry, cannot start the SQL Server services. Okay. So if you want to see the resource database, files, you can go to installation location. So I install in C program files, Microsoft SQL Server, we have to select the instance name. Here my instance name is MSSQL 13. Like here we can see that MS, AS and MSSQL. AS means annual services. Database engine service means MSSQL. 13 means 2016 and SQL Server name. Click on it and go to bin, and in this location we can see the resource database files. So like we know that like whenever we create a database, whether it is a system database or user defined database contains two files. One is data file and one is log file. Right? Again, this is also very important entry question. So what is research database? What is the purpose of the research database? Research database contains the all the system supported files or maybe system objects we can say, and this is useful for so it will improve the patching upgradation procedure. Like so I mean, why they implemented resource database means to reduce the burden on the master database and to speed up the upgrade process. Like whenever you're applying the patches, like the CUs or hotfix or cumulative updates, or whenever you're upgrading the version from one version to another version. So this directly pointing to the master database, and it will save or it will improve the speed up the upgradation process, right? So, and the location for the resource database. So it is in root directory because I install in C drive. But if you install in F drive, so wherever you selected as a root directory on on the particular drive, and Microsoft SQL Server, and then server name and MS SQL and bin. In this location, we can see the resource database, data file, and log file information. Okay, so we cannot do the the standard backup and restore operations on resource database. So if you want to take a backup, just we have to control C and control we just normal physical files copying, like control C, control V. So that's the way we can take the backup, but we cannot take normal database backup. Anyway, we haven't discussed about backup. That is our next topic that I will discuss. Okay, just note that point. We cannot take backups as like other databases for system database, for resource database. Okay, so that's about the system databases. Very important interview question, telling about system databases, explaining about system databases. Sometimes they specifically ask for master database or research database or maybe TMDB database. Okay, so database corruptions and recovery, that is our next topic, backup and recovery classes that I will discuss more about, right? And that's about the system database. And very important point is that we already aware of some error logs. We already spent some time on installation related log files, right? So that's mean whenever installation is failed, we need to go to the C program files, Microsoft SQL Server, summary.txt file. There is a bunch of files, and we have to verify the log files based on the timestamp, right? So those are all files are related to installation related. So if you want to see the installation successful, failed, or a kind of installation related information. So there is another error log files. Those error log files mainly pointing to the database engine services, transaction related. So the error log file is located on management. Under management, we can see SQL Server logs. SQL Server logs. So by default, we have 6 archive files, and one as the current file. That's mean active file. So remaining all are archive files. So if you want to read the error log, double click on it, and here we can see that. So whenever you create a database, whenever you drop the database, whenever backups are successful, again whenever you restart the SQL Server, again. So if you look into the restarts, it will verify the uh, like operating system, and then verify the whether RAM, enough RAM and CPUs. Then after that, system master database will come to the online, and then after that all other databases will come to the online, like CPA information. It should verify whether operating system, whether it has enough specified RAM and other CPUs. So all the things will, it will validate, and then after that master database will come to online. Here we can see that master database, and then after that remaining system databases like a model, MSDB, TimDB, and then after that finally the user databases will come to online, right? So, so these array logs very useful because even it is useful for interview, and again, so whenever you are encountering any kind of problem in real time, the first place is SQL Server array logs. Okay, maybe sometimes in interview point of view, we're having some kind of problem, how we can solve it. Like first we have to, if we want to solve, we have to know we have to understand what exactly the problem. If we want to know about the problem, so then we need to verify the error log. Okay, so because if database is not accessible, there are many reasons. So some of the reasons we can find in SQL Server error logs. Okay, so we can also have different options, like we can use the filter, we can specify the username, we can specify the start date and date, and the message contains source, instance name, and again every error uniquely identified by the event ID, error number. We can also use the event ID and specify and click OK. For example, 18456, apply filter. I think there are no, okay, let me, so verify, just go to, because in real time environment we have huge amount of error information, like if you're not using filter or any other commands, it's very difficult to get the details. So 18456, apply filter. I think 18456, there is error, right?
The
Or
second one,
maybe
yeah.
error message content, like I think it's not taking 18456. Yeah, so we can use that. So error means when login is failed to connect to the server, that time we can see that error message, and that's what we can. That's when my intention is that using the filter to easily searching the specific errors or maybe specific database or users in the error log. Okay, very useful. That means whenever you have any kind of problem, first place is that verifying the error logs.
So,
So
Malesh, if we have something like 18546 or 1855, so where do we check this error if we are not able to understand what the error is? Do you have any other link to check which type of error is this one? Any with the event ID?
no, like means, I mean, like once you identify this kind of problem, because I can see that. I mean, in the error log we can see that, like why it is not, it is failing, and then error numbers we can see that. So reasons we cannot see that. So for getting the reasons, maybe we need to depend on the Microsoft sites or maybe some blogs for identifying it. But few errors we can see the reasons, but the most of the reasons we can know the why it is failing, but we cannot see the exact reasons. If we want to see the reason, then we have to depend on the internet or maybe Microsoft sites, or maybe we have a online books like that we can install during installations. I didn't forget to tell that. Again, there also we can verify the information, so why the error will create it. So in this case, you can see that clearly the password did not match the diff for the login. For example, user is saying that SA, I'm not able to log into the server. Is complaining that. So there are many reasons. I think we have more than 10 reasons. If user is not able to connect to the server, that all we can cover it in troubleshooting classes. So, but so one of the reason is that maybe entering the wrong password. When it comes to the SQL Server error logs, it is clearly saying that password did not match that for the login provided. It is clearly saying that. That's mean user is entering the wrong password. So the kind of some errors we can get we can when reading the error message we can know the reason, some we cannot reason, so we cannot get the proper reason. For getting the proper reason we have to depend on the Microsoft site or maybe books online for getting the more information about the particular error. So I think, I think you're clear, or you're expecting something.
Yeah, yeah, right. Okay, fine. I think Microsoft site would be because we check in errors like an Oracle. We check.
Right. So I forget to tell that, like in the ELF, we have a books online. So everything we can tell that, like even that useful for. I think maybe when installing the new server, I will enable that. So I think I did not enable the books online option. Technical support, online privacy statement, not this one. Like if I install, then we'll get the resource center. I'll tell in the next class after installing the server. For
Okay.
example, like in the books online, we have a default option. If you select during installation, then you can search that you can gain knowledge. For example, 18456, why the login is failing. So it's like very useful for gaining the knowledge. And again, so when you have kind of problem, uh, to understand more about the particular issue. And we can also depend on the Microsoft, because there is in-depth subject in the books online, so that's the reason people not prepared to do that. Like, but it is very in-depth and very clear. So if you want, you can also use it for getting the more information about the particular error or kind of problem. Or maybe you can depend on the Microsoft side again. So in the troubleshooting classes, what are the sites and how to verify in the Microsoft site and how to raise the questions, those are all the things I'll cover in troubleshooting classes. Don't worry about it.
Okay. Thank you.
So right, so this is the one way to verify the error logs, and here we can see that like if you want to see the previous errors, we can also select here. Okay, and here under we can see that agent services related errors also you can see that. Windows logs, again some information also is storing in the Windows event logs. Again, Windows event logs also we can verify. But if we don't find any proper information in SQL Server, maybe we can also better look into the Windows error log. Okay. So the next, if you want to see the error information using the command, so we need to point the command to the master database, and the command is that sp underscore read error log, and you can change to the, by default it is in grid mode like in the tabular format. And here we have an option, like if you want to, if you select the result to text, it will be in the text format, you can easily read it. Okay, so for reading, sp underscore read error log, and if you want to see through GUI mode, then we can double click and we can see the errors. And for filtering purpose, we can also use the PowerShell script. Some we can also use some tsql commands to get it, but either of the options you can use it. Okay, clear. And if you want to configure, we can also configure more error logs. Just if, for example, by default it has 6 archive files and the one current one. And whenever you restart the SQL Server, every time new error log will be created. So that's mean the sixth last one will be removed, and that's mean the current one converted to archive one, 2, 2, 3, 3, 4, 4, 5, 5, 6. This will be converted. So every time whenever you restart it, new error log file will be generated. Okay. So if you want to configure more files, click configure, and here we can see that the default is 6, and we can, if you want to use more files, you can select here. So the value must be between 6 and 99. Minimum and minimum is 6 and maximum is 99. So many organizations, maybe people prefer to use 7 or maybe 13, but no one prefer to use more log files. Okay, but in the current organization we just go with the default option, that is 6. Okay, so very important, like maybe interview purpose, maybe So the first, like when you say that when something is happened wrongly, when you say that so we need to verify the error log, then definitely if answers are like they can give 60 marks for that, because that's the first important thing to identifying the cause. Right? So that's about the error logs and system databases. I think now we'll start discuss about question and answer topic. So this is mean I added question and answer topic mainly for interview purpose. So and it's a kind of revision as well. So let's discuss about architecture interview question and answers. Okay, it's a kind of revision for us. So like we completed all architecture related topics: server architecture, database architecture, log architecture, and the workflow, the transaction processing, and system databases. Now the final one is the interview question answers. Okay, so we already know about server architecture, like what are the component, what are the layer, what are the importance of the components. We already discussed. So in the most of the cases, maybe you can get the direct questions. So can you explain? Can you brief about server architecture? Okay. Sometimes they will ask only the specific layer. Can you explain about the protocol layer? Can you explain about the second layer, relational engine, story engine, SQL? Sometimes they'll ask the specific layers or maybe specific components. Okay. So better we have to understand and we have to ready to answer the server architecture and or maybe any components when they ask. Okay, the first one is that first question is what is relational engine and its role? So relational engine is a second layer of the SQL Server architecture. In the relational engine, there are three important components: parser, optimizer, and query executor. Parser verifies syntactically the query is correct or not, right? So whenever you're executing any queries, any data, so parser will verify. Then if there is no errors, then that information will pass to the optimizer. Optimizer will try to it will generate the plan how query needs to be executed, and it always trying to give a best plan for query execution. After plan generated by the optimizer, then query executor will execute the query based on the optimizer plan. Okay. So that those are the things we need to explain about relational engine and its role. Parser, optimizer, executor. And then coming to the next question, the second question is what is story engine and its role? So database engine contains many components. Sorry, not database engine, story engine. So story engine contains many components. Like it contains the transaction services, file manager, buffer manager, and log manager, utilities, access methods. There are many operations are happening. Like access methods will get the what data needs to be modified, updated. That information will in front of the buffer manager. Buffer manager will modify the transactions based on the access methods information. And file manager controlling all the files information. And the transaction manager controlling the transaction. And log manager will assign the logs based on the operation. Yeah. These are all kind of operations will happen in story engine. And move to the next question. What is SNA protocol layer? So SNA protocol layer or maybe protocol layer we can call it. This is the first layer of the SQL Server, right? In this layer we have protocols. Protocols mainly we are using for data transfer and then establishing the connection. Like it's giving the way to transfer the data from application to databases. Like we have TCP/IP, named file, and shared memory. Like how HTTP protocol is using in for browsing the internet data. For SQL related operations, we are using TCP/IP or named files and shared memory. But in real time environment, we mainly prefer to use the TCP/IP because it is accepting intranet and internet like WW World Wide Web connections it will support. So no need to worry about virtual interface adapter because it's a deprecated. It's totally removed from SQL Server 2012 and above. So before that we have VIA. Anyway, before 2012 versions are totally outdated. So no need to worry about it. So moving to the next question, what is plan catching? So plan catching means like optimizer will generate the plans, right? Right. So whatever plans optimizer generated, those plans information sometimes it will store in the buffer pool, right? So the kind of plan, the whatever plan generated by the optimizer, those plans information will be in the if it is in the buffer pool, then we can call it as a plan catching. Okay. And what are access methods? Access methods will work like a mediators between the relational engine and storage engine, and it contains the information what data needs to be modified or updated. That information will pass to the buffer manager. And buffer manager. So buffer pool, buffer manager, they're all related to RAM. Okay. Buffer manager is responsible for modifying the data. So because we already know that physically the data is stored in the data file. But whenever you're doing any modification, the modification will not directly modified, updated in the system, I mean data files. The data will updated in the RAM, and the later those changes will reflected or maybe moved to the data files. Those where they those exist in the drive or maybe storage. Okay, so like modifications we are using buffer manager. And coming to the buffer pool, so it's a part of RAM, and it's using the user amount of data for storing the storing the all the cache related information like buffer plan cache and data cache, store processor cache. Data cache in the sense whatever pages are recently modified, those pages even updated in the even after updated in the data file, sometimes those data will be sitting in the buffer pool, right? So the kind of all the kind of cache information will be in the buffer pool. If you have a huge amount of buffer pool, then the performance will be good because whenever the data modification required like insert or update, so if you have if everything is in the buffer pool, then the operations the required process IO operations will be high, and the transaction completed in the faster manner. Okay, so maintaining a use and good buffer full or maybe enough RAM is always good for server SQL server to running in the faster manner. Data cache is done like all pages, recently modified pages, storing in the buffer pool, then we can call it as a data cache. And the next one is that what is transactional manager and its role? So transactional manager is in the storage engine, third layer, and it controlling the transactions. Every transaction must follow the asset properties, whether transactions are following asset properties or not, whether transactions information is properly updated in LDA file, like all kind of the operations managed by the transaction services or maybe transaction manager. Okay, so moving to the next question, what is right tail log, or maybe simply we can call it as a what right tail log. This is an algorithm which is controlling to store the data first in the LDF file before storing the data in the data file. But as for yesterday class, whatever data is coming from application, first it will go to the buffer, and when it is comes to the buffer, at the same time that information also recorded in the LDF file. This process is a synchronization. Immediately it will happen. Right? But storing the data from buffer to data file, it is asynchronous. It's not happening immediately. After updating the data in the RAM, later the data will be updated in the data file. Right. So very important entry questions. Write a algorithm. So simple for simple remembering, we can say before. I mean, it will controls to store the data first in LDA file before storing the data in the data file. And move to the next question. What are dirty pages? Dirty pages is modified pages. Simply, you can call it as a dirty pages, or we can also call it as a modified data or modified pages. How is that dirty page written to disk? Like there is a checkpoint operation. Checkpoint will periodically verify the buffer, and in the buffer if I identify any modified data or dirty data, those data will send to the flush to the data files, right? So again, so sometimes when you're restarting the server, like if any data is modified data in the buffer, when you're restarting the SQL server and altering the database, shut down the server, that time also without depend on the regular interval, checkpoint will occur and flush the data, try to flush the data from buffer to disk. And very important, another important interview question: what is checkpoint? Checkpoint is a database operation, and helps to flush the data from buffer to disk on a regular interval. Like by default, every 60 seconds it will run on each and every database, flushing the modified data from buffer to disk. Right, and we have, I mean, the frequency of checkpoint is like every 60 seconds, and we have 4 different type of checkpoints available. And before 12 we have 3, but from 2012 onwards, before 2012 we have 3, from 2012 onwards we have 4 different checkpoints. The first one is that automatic checkpoint, the second indirect checkpoint, and manual checkpoint, and then internal checkpoint. So automatic checkpoint. Automatic checkpoint means based on the recovery interval, server recovery interval, the checkpoint will run. So the recovery interval is by default 0. If you want to verify the recovery interval information, properties, and then database settings, there we can see that recovery interval 0 means 60 seconds or maybe 1 minute. So based on the recovery interval, if checkpoint is running, that we can call it as an automatic checkpoint. Okay. The second one is that indirect checkpoint. Indirect checkpoint is available from SQL Server 2012 onwards. So before 2012, we don't have indirect checkpoint. We only depend on the automatic checkpoint. Automatic checkpoint running through based on the recovery interval. So it is a server level operation, server level settings. So we cannot use it for the database. Like if you set the recovery interval like 1 minute or maybe 60 seconds, and it is applicable for all the databases, right? But from 2012 onwards, we have an indirect checkpoint. Using indirect checkpoint, we can specify the recovery interval to the individual databases. Before 2012, whatever recovery interval value, it is applicable for all the database by default. But from 2012 onwards, so it is applicable until if you change the recovery model, recovery interval for the particular database. For example, now we have a default recovery interval, right? That is the 0 on 2016 server. It is applicable for all the databases. But here I want to use the different checkpoint occurrence for testdb2. Okay, now I'll use the indirect checkpoint, properties, and go to file, options. In the options, we can see there is one. Yeah, sorry. Target recovery time seconds. So default 60 seconds. So that means it is take the server value. Now I'm changing 120. Now on all other databases, checkpoint will running, automatic checkpoint running on every 60 seconds. But when it comes to the testdb2 database, it runs on every 120 seconds. So this is called a indirect checkpoint. So indirectly on specific database, we can change the recur interval settings to run the checkpoint. So it's a new feature in SQL Server 2012. And we already seen manual checkpoint. We can also run the checkpoint manually using checkpoint command. If you want, you can run it. And the next one is that internal checkpoint. So internal checkpoint means it doesn't depend on the recur interval. Whenever you're restarting the server or shut down the operating system, whenever you're taking the full backup, whenever you're altering using the alter database commands on any specific database, internal it will run the checkpoint and then operation will start. So that's mean without depending on regular intervals if a checkpoint is running based on the operation, few operations, the kind of checkpoint we can call it as a internal checkpoint, right? So that's about the checkpoint. And moving to the next one, what is lazy writer? So lazy writer is also it's using the same kind of operations as the checkpoint is doing. So, but it is again it's in server level, and by default it is always in sleeping state. So whenever memory pressures are active, that time only the laser writer will active and it will try to flush the data from buffer to disk, and it is also trying to clear the buffer pool data, right? So based on the laser writer occurrence, we can also say that is there any potential slowness, potential low on the memory on the SQL server or not, we can verify that. Again, so we'll discuss same in the performance tuning classes, right? And another important point for lazy writer, so we have only one lazy writer. We don't have different lazy writer, and we cannot run lazy writer manually. It's totally controlled by the SQL Server internal processes. So we also get a difference between lazy writer and checkpoint. Can refer that one, because lazy writer, checkpoint, these are very, very important interview questions. So what are ghost records in SQL Server? So whenever you're deleting the data, so the data will be deleted, but this space still allocated. Still allocated for the allocated. So those kind of pages data we can call it as a ghost records or maybe ghost data. Excuse me. So the kind of, whenever you delete the data, when you're using the delete operation, data will be deleted, but whatever pages allocated for those data, still those pages think that there is a data. The kind of pages we can call it as a ghost record, right? It's a development question. And which process removes the records which are marked as ghost records? So there is an internal operation, ghost cleanup process. So this will clean the all the ghost records. And if you're clear about it, then move to the next question. What is hot hat CPU term in SQL Server? It's a new feature from 2008. For example, if you want to add more CPUs to the SQL Server, before 2008, we need to restart. Restart is required to apply those changes. But from 2008 onwards, without restarting, without downtime, we can add CPUs to the SQL Server. Okay. Clear about it, then move to the next one. What is maximum degree of parallelism? We already discussed this in configuration. So maximum degree of parallelism, is minimizing and controlling the query parallel execution process. Like the default is 0 value. So that's mean whenever executing the query, it will try to use the all available CPUs. When you specify the value, for example, we have 4 CPUs, and if you specify the value is 2, when executing the query is trying to use only the 2 CPUs. Based on the maximum degree of parallelism, the query will try to use the CPUs. So before 2016, it is a server level setting, but from 2012 onwards, 16 onwards, 2016 and above versions, we can also do it on the database level settings. If you want to see the maximum degree of parallelism settings. So go to properties and then go to advanced. The bottom you can see that maximum degree of parallelism. Okay. But for 2016 onwards, we can also do it on the database level. If you go to options, in the options you can do that. Max job setting. 0 means default. Try to use the all changes. I mean all CPUs. Okay. So that's about the architecture question and answer, Sandy. So it's a kind of boring because a lot of theoretical things. But only in this topic only we have so many questions, theoretical questions. But from the next topic, backup and recovery, like we have more practical and less theoretical. From once we enter into the backup and restore classes.
So Malesh, one question from my side. So from the architecture point of view,
Mhm.
uh, what are the major difference between 2012, 14, and 16? Like, has anything majorly changed in architecture? Like, I see checkpoint there is some new feature added, and you said like
Mhm.
maximum degree of parallelism. So those are the properties. Coming to the only the I'm not talking about the properties. Only the architecture. Do we have any specific changes regarding the architecture in for 2005? Sorry, I mean to say 2008, 12, and 16.
Yes, so mainly one of the changes that the log, but there are many, there would be many, but I didn't look into that. But one of the major changes in like apart from like, I mean, I'm focusing on only the architecture level. So the architecture level, one of the changes that creating more VLF files, like from 2014 onwards, like we discussed about VLFs like in yesterday class log file. So like it will create more bunch of ELF files. So they improve the one of the kind of process and this. So that I know, but there would be many. But when it comes to the properties like features, like there are many new features added in each and every version. When it
Yeah.
comes to the features, then we have a separate class for discussing the all the versions feature. But as for your questions, I didn't have much knowledge. Like what I mean, what are the changes at architecture level? I didn't look into that more. But there was one of the changes in 2014 is like improving the VLF file for process. Yeah,
Okay. Thank you.
thanks, Andy. So it's a good question, Andy. Definitely, I need to prepare. I mean, I need to look into that, like artist level changes. Like there are, but very few, but changes. But we should know that. Okay, thank you. So then after that, next question is database architecture and database properties. So the previous one is that server. Now we can cover the database architecture and database properties. Okay. So how many types of files are there in SQL Server? So SQL Server databases have three different type of files: primary data file and transactional file. Primary data file we can also call it as a master data file. So whenever we create a new database created with the two files, data file and log file, right? And secondary data file means whenever you want to create a new data file, those I mean after manual created data files, like apart from which comes along with the database, whatever files you created, those files we can call it as a secondary data files. And the next question is that explain each type of data files. What is primary data file, secondary, and log file? So primary and secondary data files, these two files mainly we are using to store the user data, right? And transaction file contain the like transaction log file contain the transactions information. So then what is the difference? Like both files, primary data file and secondary data file contain using to store the data, right? So the difference between these two files are, so the primary data file contain the system data, like when created database, some system files, system objects will create it. Those data will be in the primary data file, but those not in the system database files. Okay, so that is the one of the different and primary data file contain there is a one page called boot page. Boot page is also in the primary database. Boot page means it contains all the database properties, all this kind of information. So that is also in the primary data file. So those are the differences. And yeah, so major differences is called boot page. So here boot page is in the primary server, primary data file. How many maximum files can be added to your database? 32767. So the database count is 32767. Files count is also 32767. Okay. Now we already seen that how to create a new file on a database. So the next one is that what are file groups and file groups type. So file group in the sense a group of files. Simply can call it as a file group. So the file group concept, when we are go for file group in the sense, uh, like the one is that like if database contain huge amount of data, and if you want to improve the IO operations, the time usually will create the file group to creating multiple file groups and multiple storages, then it will improve the IO operations. For it is applicable for huge amount of like more than terabytes. It's in like huge amount of data, right? And also file groups we are using to maintain the archive data. For example, we have a 500 GB database, and in 500 GB, 300 is the old data. We are not doing modifications on 300 GB data on regular basis. Okay. So what we can do that to improve the database performance, we can extract all 300 GB data, which is only using for read-only purpose. Those data we can move into the another file group, or maybe we can create in the, I mean, we create it as a, we can put in the file groups, right? So it's a kind of archival process or improving the IO operations by creating multiple. And the third reason is that like partition, like we are using the table partition. So like mainly one table, we know that data will be in the table. Like if table contain 100 GB or 200 GB, like if we're doing the operations again, it will create some IO operations. IO in the sense the read and write operations. So again, so sometimes we are creating a partition. So that's mean table data is segregating into multiple devices, multiple drives to improve the IO operations. Again, when you wanna go for table partition, that time also we create the file group. Right. Now we'll see that how to create the file group. And so if you want to create a file group, go to program files. We already seen how to create a file group, file. So if you want to create a file, let me create a file group first. Okay. Creating a file group, select the file group and add file group. Specify the file group name. FC file group 1 or maybe file group 2019. That's it. Very simple. So I'm creating two file group 2018. So we created two file groups. Right. So now I'm creating a new file. File name is file 2018. 19. That's the file name. And here by default file group is pointing to the primary. That's mean default one group will created that is called as a primary file group. So by default when you create a file group it will pointing to the default file group. But here this file I want to add into the FZ 2019. Okay. And we can specify the file location and FZ 2019 1.ndf file. Whenever you're creating a new data file, the extension should be .ndf file. Okay, now this file will be in the FZ 2019. And I want to create a one more file. File 2018 one, and here I'm selecting 2008 file group. FZ 2018 1.ndf file. So and create the multiple files in a file group. Okay. Now this database contains three file groups. One is primary, that's the default one, and we created episode 2008 and 2019. Right? So again, so when I created 2019 and 18, so what the developers will so that they use some conditions to move the archive data to the 2008 and 2019 and file groups, and they will set it as a read only. That's mean when once you move all the data to these file groups, and if you set the read only, it doesn't support the write operations. Only we can use it for only the reporting purpose, right? So this way we can create files and file groups for a database.
And Malesh, is there any way that we can create tables in particular file groups?
Yes, we can create. So we have to specify the which file group the file table should move. So we can create, but we have to use the command through commands only. We can do that, but we cannot do the graphically.
Okay,
And
so
again, so one file group to another file group. We can also move the files from one file group to another file group.
okay, physical copy command you want to say copy paste?
No, like there is some other commands, but like not physically. So we have to like clean up and then move the data to the other. I think it can also done through graphically, but commands generally they prefer commands to do that. Like empty file migrated to another file in the same file group. So that's mean if you move the file data to one file to another file, we can use this option. But it's an important question. So, but we can move through commands, but not through graphically. I think we have a commands for that.
Okay, okay, got it. So, in general, how would be the application segregation? Like, do we have multiple file groups for each of the, I mean, application? Like, if you have one SQL database and have multiple users or multiple schemas in it, so how do we segregate those things? Do we create multiple file groups? Am I right, or
No,
how is it?
no, generally it's depend on the application because when generally they define that what is the database architecture for database configuration for the applications in some scenarios, but in not all scenarios. For example, if customer is asking to we are using one application and we need a database, so we will ask that what is the data growth for in the database, and if it is like not much growth in the database, just we will go with the default. We don't create multiple file groups and multiple files. We just create data as normal standard database, and we'll give the access to the application. Sometimes in real time environment, what they will do that they will come up the document. So we contact the application like the business, vendor, application vendor. So these are the database configuration recommendations. So they will specify that configuration recommendations. So we have to be multiple file group. The file group names in this way, and then this is the default size. So when we when they come up with any specific configuration, then we should follow that. Until unless this we can go with the default.
Default? Okay.
So yeah, so even
Okay.
as per my experience, like we don't take any specific thing. Maybe sometimes what happen, maybe after maybe sometimes they'll ask that we want to archive the data from this database. That time maybe we have to recommend it to create multiple
Yeah, my
file
subsequent
group.
question is same thing. So, can we take backup of this particular file group?
Yes, exactly. Yes, we can
Okay.
take
Okay, double.
single file backup. We can take this, and file group backup is we can take it. So again, in the backup and restore
Yeah, right, right.
topic, we'll discuss.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, cool. And what are the files and file groups? It's done. What is the default file group is primary file group. Is it possible to change the default file group from primary to some other user defined group? Yes, we can do that. So your default file group means it's created along with the database creation, and whenever you create a new file, by default it will point to the primary file group. But if you want to change to the other file as the default file group, we can change it. Go to properties and then go to file groups, and now I'm using default. Now exit 2008 is the default. For example, I created it. 2020. Like now I'm selecting, this is the default one. That's mean whenever you create a new file, if you're not specifying the file group, by default, the file will be created in AppSheet 2020 file group. Okay, that's mean as per the questions. Okay, because it is empty. Sorry, let me go to properties and select the file group. The default one is that primary. Now I'm changing to 2018 and click OK. Now whenever you create a new file, the file will default go to the exit 2008 file group if you're not specifying the file group name during the creation. So what is the default? Yeah, that's fine. So is it, yeah, that's right. How many maximum file groups can be added in a database? Again, file count is 32767. File count, file groups count is same, and the database count is also same. Okay, so next question is that, is it possible to add transaction log file in a file group? No, we cannot add log files in file group. It won't support. We can only add data files. What is the useful of multiple file groups? Like as I said, that improving the IO operation and easy to manage the data, archival data, and table partition, and easy to backup and restore. We can do that. Like if you have a 1 terabyte data and 500 GB is a read only, so no need to take the read only database data on regular basis because there is no changes. So we can maybe yearly once or maybe monthly once you can take the read only. So using the file group concept, you can also get benefits on backup and restore operations. So moving to the next question. Is there any benefit to add multiple log files? No. So there is a benefit of creating multiple data files, but there is no benefit at all to create a multiple log file. So the reason is that when it comes to the data files, it's a it's a simultaneously the data will be splitting into the data file. But when it comes to the log file is a sequential order. If one file is completely filled, then only it will try to use the new log file. For example, we have log file 1 and log file 2. So when you are inserting the data, it will try to use the first file only. Once complete, 100% completed, then it will try to use the next log file. But when it comes to the data files, to have a 4 data file, then the 4 data files will use to, the transaction information will segregate or used by or 4 files. So that is the reason there is no use of creating multiple log files. And we don't create multiple log files in real-time environment, but it will support. We can create, but there is no use of that. So will below script, like when it comes to the create database command, we can use it. What is the database growth settings are available in database? We already discussed in yesterday class. How much rate the data increase in a database, like once complete the initial size. So that settings, particular settings, we can use it. What are the recommended settings to transaction log file growth? So when it comes to the transaction log file settings, like at least 25% in whatever size the data file is having, 25% size we have to allocate it to the log file. And again, so based on the index size, so because in the performance tuning classes, we'll discuss about maintaining indexes. If you're using more index size in the data file, maybe indexes are high. So again, whatever size the indexes have, the double size free space we require in the LDF file. Okay, so that's a point to keep in mind. So the later in the performance tuning classes, we'll understand. Like here, based on this question, this answer is that we have to maintain at least 25% free space of in the SQL Server when with I mean, the total data file size. And moving to the next question, what is compatibility level of your database? Simply compatibility level define the behavior. Like every version has its own compatibility level. 2005 has 90, and 2008 and 8 is having 100. 2012 is 110, 2014 is 120, 2016 is 130, 17 is 140, and 2019 is 150. So that means based on the compatibility level, the database will behave. For example, I have a SQL Server 2016 server. Okay, 2016 server database compatibility default compatibility level is 130. Compatibility level we can see under options. Here we can see compatibility level. But this database, I want to behave it as a 2014. That's mean this database should be compatible with SQL Server 2014. So I can change to 2014 compatibility now. Even if the database is in 2016, it will work with it will very compatible with the SQL Server 14 behavior or maybe properties. Right? So defining the behavior, we can use the compatibility level. Based on the compatibility level, also we can tell that the version 13 indicates 2016 and 14 12. So this is useful for identifying the version information as well. Let me change back to the 13. So sometimes what happens when you migrate the databases from one version to another version, uh, still application is not, for example, application, some of the components are not, application components are not supported with 2016. But we have a situation to migrate your database from 2012 to 2016. So in that case, what we can do that, so we can migrate the database, so we can change to the 14 compatibility. Right? So those very rare cases, sometimes we have this kind of situation for changing the using the older compatibility level in the newer version. Okay. What are the difference between different states in databases? Like we have like online, offline, restoring, recovering, suspended, and recovery pending. So emergency. So these are the different states for database. Again, in the later classes, you'll see that online in the sense live database. It is accepting all the connections and everything we can do based on the permissions. So offline in the sense simply can define as a dead database. So we cannot do anything on the databases, offline database. Restoring, when you're restoring the database, that we can see recovering. So when you're restarting a SQL server, if there is any pending data in the log file, LDF file, those data will be going to the uh, in the data file. So the process is in recovering state, recovery pending. Okay, so if any reason the process is pending fail, then we can see the recovery pending. And suspected or corrected, and final one is that emergency. Okay, so in the later classes we'll see all kind of states. Again, I'll explain based on the states which when we're working on that. How many database can be created? 3267. What is paging? Right, we already discussed in yesterday class. So page is a small storage data storage unit or device, we can call it. It contains 8 KB data and 96 bytes allocated for the page header. Page header contain the page name, page ID, whatever free space available in the page, everything, my kind of information you can see. What is extent? Extent is a group of 8 pages, we can call it as extent. And we have two different type of extent: uniform extent and uh, mixed extent. Uniform extent in the sense the extent completed with the same kind of files, we can call it as a uniform. If extent completed with different type of pages, we can call it as a mixed extent. Okay. The next database property, what is the difference between single user, restricted user, and multi-user? So again, Single user means, sorry, single user means that will accept only one connection at a time. It doesn't accept the multiple connections. Okay, go to properties, options. Here we can see that multi-user by default that was created with multi-user. We can see single user. Single user mode. Single user means it only accepts one connection at a time. Okay, whenever you're doing troubleshooting, the time you'll use the single user. And multi-user means it will accept the multiple connection. Restricted user in the sense whoever having the excessive privileges in SQL Server, those users only can access the database, not like all users whoever having the low privileges, low level privileges. Okay, so multi-user I'm setting, and read only. Like by default, when you create a database is supporting read and write operations. But if you want to use it only for read only, because when you have a older database, and if you don't want to do any modification on the whole data, so we can put the database in read only mode. Okay. Yeah. So if it is a read only, we can easily identify that read only, and in this database we cannot do the write operations. Only can do the read operations. I think yeah. So we completed all the interview question and answer. So, so that's for today class only. So it's a kind of boring because a lot of theoretical things than the practical. So we need might have some patience. So so that's for today class only. So server architecture creating. So we completed the fourth topic in our course content. Server architecture, creating database properties, database architecture, log architecture, warrior system databases, interview question answers. So that's for today, and for the architecture topic. And the next topic is a backup and restore. So initially 1-2 classes we have theoretical, then after that we have a more practical, like taking a backup, restoring, recovery methods. So more practical work we'll do from tomorrow onwards. Okay, Andy, so that's for today class. If you have any questions, you can feel free to ask me. If you don't have anything, we'll wrap up now and then we'll catch up tomorrow. Okay, Andy.
Yeah, okay, Mallesh.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Manish.
Thank you, Andy. Thank you so much for your time and have a nice day.